Let me describe your life, and you tell me how close I get. You have a job, a real one, not a hustle, not a side thing, an actual job with a salary and maybe some benefits, and the general understanding that you are a functioning, contributing member of society. You pay your bills, mostly on time. You're not rich, but you're not broke. You're fine. You're doing fine. Except lately, fine feels different. Fine feels like it requires more effort than it used to. Fine feels like you're running to stay in the same place. Fine feels like one unexpected expense away from a situation you don't want to think about too hard. The car insurance went up again. Groceries cost what restaurants used to cost. The rent increase letter arrived like it does every year, cheerful and completely indifferent to your feelings about it. You make more than you made 3 years ago and somehow have less room to breathe than you did 3 years ago. And when you sit down and try to figure out exactly where the money goes every month, the math almost works, but not quite. There's always a gap, a small one, but it's always there. You are not bad with money. You are not lazy. You are not doing anything obviously wrong. You are middle class in 2025, and the middle class is quietly going broke. I'm Naomi, this is my channel, and today we're getting into exactly why this is happening, who is responsible, and what you can actually do about it. Because understanding the trap is the first step to not spending the rest of your life inside it. Let's go. Let's start with inflation. Because everyone talks about inflation like it's a weather event, something that just happens, something external and abstract that arrived recently and will presumably leave eventually. That framing is doing a lot of work to obscure what inflation actually did to middle-class households over the past several years. So let me make it concrete. From 2020 to 2024, cumulative inflation in the United States ran somewhere between 20 and 22% depending on the category. That means something that cost $100 in January 2020 cost roughly $120 to $122 by the end of 2024 across your entire budget. Simultaneously, groceries up over 25%, rent up over 30% in many major markets, car insurance up over 50% in some states, childcare up 26%, utilities up, household goods up, healthcare up, everything up. All at once, for 4 consecutive years. Now here is the question that actually matters. Did your income go up 20 to 22% over that same period? For most middle-class households, the honest answer is no. Wage growth happened, but it lagged inflation for most of that period, meaning the raises that felt like progress were actually losses measured in purchasing power. You got a 4% raise in a year when inflation ran at 7% and your employer sent a congratulatory email about it. You lost 3% of your real income that year and celebrated. The Bureau of Labor Statistics data shows that real wages, meaning wages adjusted for inflation, declined for most American workers during the peak inflation years. The number on your paycheck went up. The amount of life that number could buy went down. The gap between those two things is where middle-class financial stability quietly disappeared. Now let me talk about something that makes all of this significantly worse. The debt situation. Total household debt in the United States recently crossed $18 trillion. That's not a typo. $18 trillion. Spread across mortgages, auto loans, student loans, credit cards, personal loans, and a dozen other categories that financial institutions have invented specifically because humans will borrow money for almost anything if you make the monthly payment sound reasonable. Credit card debt alone recently hit $1.17 trillion. The average American household carrying a credit card balance owes approximately $7,000 to $8,000, at an average interest rate that recently crossed 22% on revolving debt, which means if you carry that balance for a year, you're paying $1,500 to $1,700 in interest alone, for the privilege of having already spent money you didn't have. It's a remarkable system if you're the bank, less remarkable if you're the customer. Here's what happened during the inflation surge that most people didn't consciously notice. Middle-class households started using credit cards not for luxury purchases or emergencies, but for regular living expenses, groceries, gas, utilities, the things that simply cost more than the paycheck covered. The credit card became a bridge between income and the cost of a normal life. And bridges have tolls. The toll is 22% annually and it compounds monthly. Thomas Sowell, the economist, has written extensively about how debt functions as a tax on people who can least afford it. Every dollar paid in credit card interest is a dollar that cannot be saved, invested, or used to build any kind of financial cushion. The interest payment doesn't build equity, it doesn't appreciate, it doesn't generate returns. It simply transfers money from your household to a financial institution every single month, reliably, automatically, for as long as the balance exists. Let's talk about wages, because this is the part of the conversation where people get the most uncomfortable, which usually means it's the most important part to actually examine. The federal minimum wage in the United States has been $7.25 per hour since 2009. 2009. The iPhone 3Gs was the hot new phone in 2009. A gallon of gas cost around $2.35. A dozen eggs cost about $1. The world in which $7.25 was set as the floor for worker compensation no longer exists in any meaningful sense. The floor has not moved, everything built on top of it has. But minimum wage is almost a distraction from the more important story. The real story is what happened to middle-income wages over the past 4 decades. In 1979, the median American worker earned enough to support a middle-class lifestyle on a single income. One job, one earner. Homeownership, a car, children, vacations, and a retirement that didn't require working until the week before death. That was the deal. Work a regular job, live a regular life, retire at a regular age. Between 1979 and 2023, worker productivity in the United States increased by over 60%. Workers produced dramatically more per hour than they did 40 years ago. Technology, process improvement, and organizational efficiency have made the American worker substantially more valuable in purely economic terms. Median wages over that same period, adjusted for inflation, increased by about 15%. Productivity up 60%, wages up 15%. The gap between those two numbers, roughly 45 percentage points of economic value created by workers that did not translate into worker compensation, went somewhere. It went to corporate profits, it went to executive compensation, it went to shareholder returns. The economy grew. Workers participated in less of that growth than in any previous generation since the data has been tracked. Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor and author of The Common Good, has been making this argument for 30 years. He calls it the Great Wage Stall, and the numbers support him. The middle class didn't fail to keep up with the economy. The economy grew, and the middle class was systematically excluded from the growth. Here's where it all collides into something genuinely brutal. And I want you to stay with me here because this is the part that explains why your math doesn't quite work at the end of every month, even though you're doing everything right. Stagnant wages meet rising costs in a very specific way for middle-class households. It's not dramatic. It's not a crisis moment. It's a slow, grinding monthly math problem that just barely doesn't work. The house you could afford in 2015 costs twice as much now. Not because it's twice as good, because housing supply didn't keep up with demand and investors started buying single-family homes as assets in ways that didn't happen at scale in previous generations. The National Association of Realtors data shows that median home prices increased over 40% between 2020 and 2023 alone. Mortgage rates doubled over the same period. The monthly payment on a median-priced home today is roughly 2.5 times what it was in 2020 for the same house. First-time buyers are essentially locked out of home ownership in most major markets. The standard advice of build equity through home ownership, the single most reliable wealth-building tool available to middle-class Americans for the past 70 years, has become functionally inaccessible for a generation of middle-class earners. So they rent, and rent has increased 30% nationally since 2020, with some markets seeing 50 to 60% increases. The middle-class household that rents is paying dramatically more for housing than 4 years ago, on wages that haven't kept pace, using credit cards to bridge the gaps, paying 22% interest on those balances, and watching the homeownership path to wealth that their parents used become increasingly remote. Meanwhile, the children need childcare. Average cost of infant childcare in the United States is now over $15,000 per year in most states. In high cost of living areas, it exceeds $30,000. For a household earning $75,000, which is solidly middle class by most definitions, childcare alone can consume 20 to 40% of take-home income. The two-income household that was supposed to be the solution to stagnant wages is now the necessity, and both incomes are partially consumed by the cost of caring for children while both parents work. Elizabeth Warren, before she was a senator, co-wrote a book called The Two-Income Trap. Her argument, made in 2003 and more true today than when she wrote it, was that the second income in American households didn't create savings. It created bidding power that raised the cost of everything middle-class families needed: better school districts, bigger homes and safer neighborhoods. The costs rose to absorb the income. The financial margin didn't improve. It just operated at a higher price level with less room for error. Let me talk about the invisible costs, because the obvious costs are only part of the story. Subscription creep is real, and it adds up to more than people realize. The average American household spends over $200 a month on subscription services. Streaming, software, meal kits, fitness apps, news, cloud storage, convenience subscriptions of various kinds. Many of these were individually reasonable decisions. Collectively, they represent a $2,400 annual expense that simply didn't exist 15 years ago, and that most households have never added up. Insurance costs have exploded in ways that feel personal but are entirely structural. Home insurance in many states has increased 30 to 50% in recent years as climate-related claims have driven up industry-wide costs. Auto insurance up 50% in some markets. Health insurance premiums continue their annual ritual of increasing faster than inflation, while deductibles rise simultaneously, so that having insurance doesn't actually mean healthcare is affordable. And then there's the nickel and dime economy, the phenomenon where goods and services that used to be priced simply now come with fees, surcharges, and add-ons that inflate the actual cost well beyond the advertised price. Airline fees, hotel resort fees, restaurant service charges, ticket platform fees, delivery fees. The economy has become extraordinarily creative about extracting money in small increments that individually feel minor but collectively represent a significant annual expense that never appears in any budget because nobody budgets for the fees. So what do? Because I refuse to end a video like this without something actionable. Despair is not a strategy. Understanding is a strategy. So let's build one. First, run the real numbers on your housing. If you're renting, calculate what percentage of your take-home income goes to rent. The traditional guideline is 30%. If you're above that, housing is actively preventing wealth accumulation, and you need to either increase income, reduce housing cost, or find additional income streams to compensate. If you're considering buying, run the actual monthly payment calculation at current rates, not what you qualify for, what you can afford while still investing. Second, kill the high-interest debt before anything else. I know the investment account feels more exciting. It isn't more exciting. Paying off 22% credit card debt is a guaranteed 22% return. No investment consistently delivers that. Attack the highest rate balance first while maintaining minimum payments on everything else. The debt that's consuming your margin needs to be eliminated before the margin can grow. Third, calculate your subscription total. Actually add it up. Open your bank statement and find every recurring charge. Write down the number. Most people are genuinely surprised. Cancel anything that doesn't deliver clear value relative to cost. Be ruthless. The streaming service you use twice a month is not worth $18. It just auto-renews and you forget about it, which is exactly what it's designed to do. Fourth, build the emergency fund with genuine urgency. The middle-class household without 3 to 6 months of liquid expenses saved is one car repair, one medical bill, one job disruption away from the credit card debt spiral. The emergency fund isn't a nice-to-have. It's the structural element that prevents a bad month from becoming a bad year. Fifth, understand your wage situation clearly. When was your last raise? What has inflation done to your purchasing power since then? If your real income has declined, that is information you need to act on, whether that means negotiating, upskilling, changing employers, or building additional income streams. The economy is not going to correct this on your behalf. It hasn't for 40 years. The adjustment has to come from your own decisions about where and how you generate income. Here is the honest conclusion. The middle class is going broke, not because middle class people are bad with money. Not because they're lazy or undisciplined or making obvious mistakes. The middle class is going broke because the economic conditions that created and sustained the middle class for most of the 20th century have been systematically dismantled over the past 4 decades, and nobody sent a memo. Wages didn't keep up, costs accelerated, debt became the bridge, and the bridge charges 22% interest and doesn't lead anywhere good. This is a structural problem. It has structural causes. And while the political and economic systems work out whether they're going to do anything about it, which based on 40 years of evidence seems unlikely to happen quickly, Real middle-class households need real strategies to protect themselves inside a system that is not currently designed to protect them. You cannot fix the federal minimum wage from your kitchen table. You cannot single-handedly correct 4 decades of wage stagnation. You cannot make housing affordable by individual decision-making, but you can eliminate high-interest debt. You can build a liquid emergency fund. You can audit your spending for the subscriptions and fees and invisible costs that are bleeding you without drama. You can negotiate your income aggressively. You can invest consistently, even if the amount is small. You can make the decisions that put you in a different position 5 years from now than the average middle-class household that never examined any of this. The system isn't rooting for you. That's just the truth. But you can root for yourself, and you can start today. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe because this is exactly the kind of conversation this channel exists for.